Good morning and welcome back to Morsels and Motors. I'm very excited this morning to be joined by this absolutely fantastic and stunning Citroen ID19. To the uninitiated, this just seems like a DS. Why am I calling it an ID or an ID19? Well, yes, this looks like a DS, and for all intents and purposes it is a DS. But in 1957, 2 years after the launch of the DS, Citroen introduced a more basic, stripped down version, or stripped out version. Now this car is a 1968 example, which means that it has just been given the new facelift front light. For me, this is the iconic shape of a DS, even though it isn't the launch shape. It's quite unusual for me. I prefer the launch shape of most cars. But I really prefer the look of these recessed lights with the glass cover over the top. So even though this is an ID model and not a DS, it's still got these swivelling driving lights. So let's have a look inside this ID. I think I'm going to be calling it the ID and the DS in turn in this video because it's confusing me. To close this door, you've got the door pull here, which is just at the right reach, but it does sort of feel like it's at the wrong angle on the door, but it actually works really well. And it slams quite significantly shut. To open the door, on the handle there's a little catch just here, which opens it. Window winder. Oh, it's quite a lot of winding to do there, but that reveals the fully pillarless door. Inside the door itself, or on the door card itself, we've got this lovely kind of animal hide orange trim. Kind of matches my jumper. We've also got a built-in armrest, which looks really comfortable, and quite a large door pocket, which is quite useful, with some really fun old French memorabilia, which is great fun. There are in the front two individual seats that can move independently of each other. They are very close to each other though, so it is essentially effectively a bench if it weren't for this sort of centre armrest, which I think is actually removable. It's got seat belts fitted on both front seats and lap belts in the rear. These headrests have been added at a later date, but they actually do look really quite period. They're quite fun. So this is what the driver's view cockpit is like in the ID. We'll start off with the instrument cluster itself. So we've got this fantastic sliding or kind of sideways speedometer, which is obviously in kph, but then the owner has put some mph markings as well, so that we can be a little bit more accurate. We've got some lights there, which I'm not entirely sure what they do, to be honest. And then down the bottom, I think that's a battery charge light, I would say. That looks like it's a mileometer. That looks like a trip computer perhaps, and that is the fuel gauge. So nice and straightforward, but pretty plush at the same time. Over here to the right, we've got a clock made by Jaeger. On the centre console, we've got the key is actually down here in the middle of the dashboard, which is a slightly odd place for modern tastes, and I think that's the starter button next to it, so you would turn the key and press the starter. I think that's a choke, a manual choke.
This one is the wonderful interior light. Okay. This one is now redundant. It was the windscreen washer, but now I have an electric one down here. Okay, that little black button there. This is the wipers. They are actually 2-speed. And they don't really work at either speed.
Fair enough.
They sort of put in a brave effort, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
These are the parking lights.
Okay.
So that's parking light right, parking light left. Must remember not to leave it on or you come back to a dead battery. And this one is the heater. So you pull it out once for a mild wind, and actually that's no, there we are, that's the mild one, and then that's the full one.
Okay.
So it does work.
I worked out what those are.
Choke starter, yeah.
Yeah, and that must be the rheostat.
No, that's not. That's the switch for the yellow lights, the swiveling lights.
Right.
But you have to be in a particular mode. Let me just try and get to it. I think it's that one, and then if you have a look in the front, you'll see the yellow lights are now on.
Now, the steering wheel is a single spoke steering wheel, but its centre line is about there. So when you're driving along going straight, that's the angle that you'll be seeing. Over on the right hand side of the dashboard in front of the passenger, we've got one of my favourite features of a Citroen DS, which is this. It's the glove box. It's a very small glove box. Now, where's the catch on it? There isn't one. It just opens. And it just closes. And it never rattles, it never flies open, it just sits there because somebody at Citroen has worked out that that is the perfect angle to have a glove box lid. I think it's just purely magical. Here we have an ashtray because obviously French. And then we have a very old-fashioned period radio, which I am told sort of works but doesn't really pick up anything anymore, sadly. I've no idea how to operate it, and to be honest, I'm not going to touch it. One of my favourite features of the DS and ID is the fact that the rearview mirror is sitting there on the dashboard, looking back behind you, rather than up there where it would be in a normal car, because obviously the angle would be wrong. So let's hop into the back of this Citroen. And we open the big chunky doors, which actually stay open on a catch as well, which is really good. And we step over this huge sill. I mean, it's vast. And then you absolutely sink into, look how sinky I am. I'm causing a proper indentation in this seat. Sink into this sort of banquette of Frenchness. It's absolutely fantastic. I feel deeply presidential sitting in the back of here. I think that I should be driven by my chauffeur Claude down the Champs-Élysées to go shopping into Givenchy or somewhere very, very expensive like that and exclusive. Having said that, in terms of actual appointment in this rear of the car, there isn't an awful lot for the rear passengers to enjoy. There's another lovely, very comfortable armrest, door handle and window winder, and then we've got the backs of the front seats, which are trimmed in this sort of plasticky, kind of ridged plastic, which is quite pleasant. And we have one ashtray because obviously, again, French. These headrests do sort of block the view, and of course the car wouldn't have had them originally, so I think it would be a little bit lighter in here in the back without them. We also have a centre armrest. Isn't that fab? All trimmed in this fabulous cloth. And behind we've got these iconic Venetian blinds, which protect rear passengers from the hot, blazing Mediterranean sun. So the roof is trimmed in a sort of flocked material. Looks original, but when you bang the roof, it is completely just one panel of glass fibre with no strengthening in it whatsoever. So you can really see the reason behind these really chunky sills is to give the car its rigidity, because there is no rigidity up the top here. There's no pillars on the doors, there's no rollover sort of bars or anything on the roof. I was going to say, I think that this bar up here probably also provides some strength, but it really doesn't. It's sort of made of plastic. So that also is not, it's not a car I'd want to roll over in, let's put it that way. Let me try and demonstrate the squishiness of these seats. It's just insane. So let's have a look under the bonnet of this ID. So we've got two catches to the bonnet. One's on this side that we pull. Then you have to go all the way around to the driver's side and do exactly the same. I think opening the bonnet exposes the age of the car a little bit, and that's where things start to go, for me, a little tiny bit wrong. So the fact that the bonnet stays on the left hand side means that the bonnet itself is floppy. It's really not very rigid at all, which is a surprise. Inside the engine bay, we start off with a spare wheel and some tools. Then we've got the radiator and the battery. and the LHM reservoir and a fan, and then right at the back we've got an engine hiding. So it's practically a mid-engined car because the engine is actually behind where the front wheels of the car are, and it's a front-wheel drive car. It's a longitudinal engine, so it goes front to back, but it drives the wheels on a front-wheel drive car, which is extremely unusual these days. You'd expect a transverse layout on a front-wheel drive car, but this is what Citroen did. I think the engine of this car is actually very much its Achilles heel, which is a bit of a shame. It's an ancient 1930s pushrod overhead valve engine from the traction avant originally, and it's just woefully underpowered. When we took the car out for a drive, it really felt like once you were out of a junction you had to change gear immediately. It had no guts whatsoever. Something I've just noticed is this little hole in the number plate, which is, I think, for the starting handle if you need it. How fab. One of the interesting things about the ID is that it has a conventional brake pedal rather than the sort of nubbin that the DS had. But actually, it operates exactly the same thing. It operates the same hydraulic valve as the nubbin in the DS. It just sort of makes it feel a little bit more conventional. Down here we've got the handbrake. It's sort of a push me pull you operated handbrake. And over on the steering column we've got here the gearbox. It's a 4-speed manual on the column, which I'm not even going to attempt to use, to be honest with you. It terrifies me. We've got the engine running in here and it really does sound very smooth indeed. Give it a rev. So down here, just inside the driver's door, we've got the height adjuster controls. It's currently set at the normal ride height, but you can change it 5 different settings. So we've got low down the bottom there if you want it slammed to the ground. As I said, normal. Then we've got slightly higher again, sort of off-roading capability. And then we've got the service one right at the very top. And you just sort of pull this lever out, move it up, and off the car pops.